Welcome, health heroes, to another session of the Forget Weight Loss Forever Project. I'm your host, Dr. Rudy Mueller, and you are here learning from the experts as we guide you through the steps to find the underlying causes to your health struggles and weight loss resistance and teach you how to implement real solutions that help you get real results. This next guest expert has triumphed in his own health journey, just as you will with this information. He dealt with symptoms of anxiety, chronic fatigue, chemical sensitivities, and gastrointestinal problems. And from this, he developed a process of healing, which came when he moved away from the allopathic view of chasing a symptom, a pill for an ill approach, instead moving to a process of addressing the underlying causes in his environment, and more specifically, addressing the cell. He is a leading expert, teaching other physicians and coaching clients through the process of cellular healing by providing the body with the environment to heal. I am appreciative of him taking some time to expand on his breakthroughs and teaching you about some of the things that are disrupting your cell's health and how to start promoting cellular repair. Please welcome Dr. Daniel Pompa.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rudy. Appreciate you having me.
I appreciate you being here very much. And expand a little bit for me on that, some of the symptoms that you had. What was your life like, and how were you able to triumph over that difficult process?
Yeah, some people have a journey that they say, hey, I was sick my whole life. I can't say that was me. I had certain sensitivities as a child, but I lived a very healthy childhood, and I was actually at that time when I got sick in the best shape of my life, honestly. I was racing my bike at the time at the best shape of my life, and life as I knew it came to a screeching halt, literally. And I thought I was just overtraining. It started with fatigue, and then it went from fatigue to debilitating fatigue, these weird headaches. I never got headaches. Insomnia, panic attacks, anxiety, a massive hormone imbalance. I mean, I knew my thyroid wasn't working right, although my blood work was normal, but my hair was dry, my skin started drying out, my body temperature was super low, all these things. My energy was tanked, and my adrenals were definitely fried. I would try to address, as a physician, my adrenals, my thyroid. It would seem to make some things better, Rudy, and it would make some things worse. So my energy might get a little better, but then my anxiety and sleep would get worse. Bottom line is I ping-ponged around downstream, and ultimately until I went upstream and figured out what was wrong, removed it, my body did heal. So I made that sound really easy, but Rudy, I was a basket case, and I was not the doctor I was, the father that I was, or the person that I was.
Well, I think that's an important piece to note. I mean, it's really about how do we optimize this? How do we go upstream so that we can be that person that we want to be, so that we can affect things like our children's lives in a more positive way? And that's the underlying message to this project. I appreciate your journey. I appreciate you being willing to share that journey. And, it really touches my heart to hear what you've had to go through. I know it had to be a lot harder than what you just mentioned, especially when you're bouncing around down there, trying to figure out what's the underlying issue here. So in that journey, coming up with this process of addressing, as you call it, the 5 R's, I'd love to hear more about that and what that was, what that really showed you to be able to move into to regaining your health.
Yeah, I sit there and I tell that story with a smile on my face, and it almost feels weird because it ruined a big part of my life. However, in it, my wife reminded me, God has a purpose in this for you. And I didn't see it. Trust me. I know there's people watching this summit right now who are in their own battle, and you don't see it. I mean, I really did want to die. I didn't want to live. And, I don't say that lightly because, there may be people out there in the same boat. But I'm telling you, there is a greater promise in it. And when I train doctors, I always say, look for your promise, your purpose, within your struggles, within your valleys, within your pain. And typically, unfortunately, it lies there. The 5 R's I developed out of my own battle. It was one of the blessings and just searching to get my own life back. The 5 R's is now a roadmap that I originally just started teaching physicians on. This is how you fix a cell. I have a saying, Dr. Rudy, and I think you know it. It's I believe you don't get well until you fix the cell. Now my saying to the doctors I train is you won't get people well until you fix their cells. And even more specifically, you won't get well until you detox a cell. And that's how I got my life back. That 5 R's became a roadmap to just explain to doctors on what to do. Now it's a roadmap even for the public. They read my 5R articles and what I do, and If you fix the cell and follow these 5 R's, and it's not like you do this first, second, third, fourth. It really is just, this is what the epidemic of hidden toxins, environmental toxins from our food, what we're injecting, what we're putting on our skin, taking in, this is what it's doing to our cells. This is really why people can't lose weight today, which I like to refer to as weight loss resistance, meaning that you can't lose weight despite what you eat, despite how much you exercise. This is becoming an epidemic. It really is a cellular issue. Why you can't lose weight, why people don't feel well today, despite doing everything that they're doing, it's a cellular issue, Rudy.
Okay. So talk me through the 5 R's a little bit. So it's, remove, regenerate, restore, reduce, and reestablish?
Yeah, right. So, you really don't have to memorize it to get the benefit from it. Our number one is you have to remove the sources, right? I mean, I wouldn't be here speaking to you if I didn't realize that mercury had bioaccumulated in my hypothalamus pituitary in my brain. By the way, that's why my thyroid wasn't working. That's why my adrenals, because that's what controls it, right? So, all this hormonal endocrine disruption that I had was being driven from that. So you have to remove the source. Now, listen, there's 2 parts to that. Remove the source from our life. So I had silver fillings in. Those had to come out for me to get the mercury out of my brain. People living in moldy homes. These people gain weight drastically and dramatically, and I don't care what they do. They don't lose weight until they get out of that moldy home. So oftentimes removing the source means removing the sources from your life, changing your diet, starting to eat organic, getting glyphosate and these things that are major toxins that many people are exposed to. But it also is getting the toxins out of the cell. Look, most detox that people do, that practitioners do, is downstream from what real detox is. And it's a term that I coined called true cellular detox, meaning you have to get to the cell to really detox. Colon cleanse, liver cleanse, the juice cleanse, not bad things, not against any of them. Far infrared saunas, use one myself. Downstream from really what it takes to get well, and that's getting upstream to detoxing the cell. And that's really part of where the 5 R's comes in, because if we don't get the cell functioning, then we're never going to be able to really even detox it. So I have 3 components to what I call true cellular detox. Number 1 is let's get the cell functioning. Number 2 is we have to improve the cellular pathways as well as downstream pathways. And number 3 is utilizing what I call true binders. Most alternative practitioners today are using different herbals and different 10-day cleanses. It really, again, it's not that it's bad, but it's not really what's going to take to get rid of heavy metals or some of these nasty biotoxins from the cell. So that's a lot.
Well, it's a lot, but I think it's important to note that it's removing the source from your environment, and then what you said was removing the source from your cell too, and upregulating the cell's function to be able to clear those toxins out more efficiently.
Right. So our number 1 is removing the source, and like I said, doing it right, as you can see, it's a passion of mine. I teach it to doctors. I teach it to clients of mine who have all over the world. The second R is regenerating the cell membrane. And why is this so important? Because the cell membrane is how the cell functions, honestly. And when we talk about why people can't lose weight, I say it's a cellular issue. I could be more specific and say it's a hormone issue. But hormone issues today, it's not about taking more hormones. And by the way, that's the answer in the allopathic world and the alternative world. Bioidentical hormones, giving more people hormones, it's in vogue. But look, there's a time and a place, perhaps. I'm not against it, but this is not the answer. So the receptors to these hormones are on every cell in your body. So when the cell comes in and has to dock to one of these receptors, it has to get its message in that cell. Now, if that receptor is blunted, affected because of cellular inflammation on this membrane, then I don't care how much hormone you take. It's not going to get its message in the cell. And people that have kids, you can relate to this, I'm sure. Yelling at your kids. It kind of works in the beginning, right? Your kids are all fearful and they listen real well. But then the more you're yelling, the less they listen. This is like hormones. When you first start taking them, go, hey, I feel great. And then you need more, and you needed more and more and more. I have a radio show called Health Seekers, and I interviewed a bodybuilder, one of the top in his day, competed against Durian Yates, and he's 55, still competing. But he talked about how he used steroids, and now he has to take massive amounts, and he's still using them. Many of his friends have died. But the point is this. he says he has to take a lot more hormones to get the same reaction. That's what people are getting with their thyroid hormone, their estrogen, their testosterone. But the bottom line is if we don't fix the membrane, we're not going to fix the receptor. And the receptor to the hormone is the key. We don't need more hormones. We actually need our cells to be more sensitive. That's why when we start whispering at our kids, they start actually listening. So there's a good analogy, I hope. So
no, it's a great analogy. Yeah. I think of the receptors as if you are screaming at those receptors and they're going deaf to hearing that signal. And so what we're trying to do is overpower them, similar to what we do with type 2 diabetics who are shifting into type 1 diabetes. We give them insulin to, all right, hear this signal now, please,
And you're going to need more, or you're going to need less. When people listen, I hear this all the time. Hey, I went to my doctor. He put me on thyroid medication, right? And by the way, the thyroid hormone is just one hormone involved in the inability to lose weight, okay, or lose weight. We could talk about leptin. We could talk about insulin. But let's talk about the thyroid hormone. So typically they go, my hair is dry, my energy's low, I'm gaining weight. It must be a thyroid problem. They go for the first amount of years and their blood work looks normal. Eventually the blood work goes, right? And so it's very frustrating when it looks normal and they can't find their problem. But 10 years later, now the blood work's abnormal. They get put on a medication and it makes their blood work normal. But here's the key. They still don't feel well. The weight's still not coming off. See, that's a cellular problem. Or maybe they're not converting the hormone. There's a few issues there that doctors don't take into consideration, most of which are toxic issues. Toxins attach to the cell membrane. They drive the inflammation, blunt the receptors. Now the hormones don't get in, or their message doesn't get in, right? So that means now your thyroid hormone's not communicating. Taking more makes your blood work normal, but it doesn't make you feel well. It doesn't give you the energy you need from the T3 getting its message in the cell, and it doesn't allow you to lose weight effectively. So taking hormones isn't necessarily the answer. You're going to need more and more, and eventually it doesn't work. You have to get to the root cause. Today, I believe that really toxins are the number one thing, but detox has to be at the cellular level because that's where the problem is, right? Mm-hmm. So, our number 2 is a big factor. And another point there, and I don't want to open up too many cans of in the worms here, but when you fix the cell membrane, it plays an integral part in turning off bad genes. So we know that we can give people, we do this with mice, right? The Duke University study took identical twins, mice, right? And they exposed one group of identical twin mice to a toxin, BPA, which, ladies, you're getting in your makeup. And it triggered the agouti gene, which caused them to massively gain weight and become obese and even develop a thyroid problem. And by the way, both groups were fed the same. This group got fat on the same diet. This group did not. Now, what they did is they turned off the gene. And they did that through methylation, but also fixing that cell membrane plays a critical role in the body's ability to turn off the bad genes. So when they turned off the agouti gene, they became thin again. Diet had nothing to do with it. It was a matter of turning on the gene and turning off the fat gene. Sound familiar with people today? Your genes can be turned on via toxins, but the good news is they can be turned off.
So just to recap, the toxins are, as you just indicated, are turning on or turning off specific genes that could potentially result in us gaining weight or having weight loss resistance. But the other thing is that they drive a cellular membrane inflammatory response, which then can blunt the receptors, therefore not allowing hormones to communicate properly with the cell or for the cell to pick up on the message of the hormones. And therefore, we start to get symptoms like we are lacking hormones, even though we may not be lacking them. And then the conventional approach has been, we need more. And what we need to do is really remove the source of the toxin and reestablish the cell membrane.
At least I know one person listened very well, and that was you. Thank you for that reiteration. And then, hey, I'll add one more to it. 3 components. It's the triple-edged sword, if you will, of why toxins can make people fat and not lose weight. I also said it's up in the pituitary hypothalamus, right? And people that have silver fillings, like I did, those are 50% mercury. They vaporize mercury the life of the filling. It goes, studies show, it's not my opinion, it goes in the hypothalamus pituitary. That's what controls your hormone system. So you add those 3 things together. It's amazing that everyone's not fat, right? I mean, honestly, because everyone's being exposed to many of these toxins that we're talking about. And it's one of 3 ways or all 3 ways it's going to get you.
Right. It is pretty amazing, the body's ability, that's for sure. So when you're regenerating the cell membrane and you remove the toxins and now you're trying to regenerate the cell membrane, are there specific things that people should take into account? Are there nutrients that they should be looking to add into their diet or add into their daily routine? Or are there specific diets that do it better than the other?
I love that topic, because there's something I call the 180-degree solution, which I always tell when I lecture. I said, look, if you just take 180 degrees opposite the message you hear from the media, whether it's TV, newspapers, magazines, do the opposite. Somehow you hit it right every time. Well, there's a big 180 in here, because if I asked your viewing audience, what are the two most dangerous fats? We would hear cholesterol and saturated fat, right? The good fats, we could hear, fish oil, etc. But I think in unison they would say the two fats, saturated fat and cholesterol. It just so happens that studies show that those two fats are the ones that actually stabilize that cell membrane the most. More specifically, those hormone receptors that I said are vital for your hormones to work, right? They ride on something called a lipid raft. Well, that means it's a raft made of fat. Well, what two fats mostly? Saturated fat and cholesterol. So if we're going to generate these receptors in the membrane, well, these two fats are the most important. Ironically, there was many studies released that when I lecture, I show the results for, but that saturated fat is the number one fat that made the biggest difference in diabetics, type 2 diabetes. Well, why? Because of its stabilization of the membrane and the receptors. So a lot of bad information. And even targeting a certain ratio of fats is very important. So just taking more fish oil, folks, is not the answer. I'm not against all fish oil, but today some people are taking too much and they become omega-3 dominant. But we want to target some of these fats that some people are not willing to stay away from or want to stay away from. But, I last year, or maybe it's 2 years, I don't know, Time Magazine had, the butter scoop on the front, right? And now they're saying, is butter bad? Well, we're finding out it's good. And they talked about how it's good for the membrane hormones. Yes, butter's loaded with saturated fat and cholesterol. Go figure.
So just another reason why adding in those fats, saturated fats, back into the diet are going to help heal that membrane, because that's what the membrane's made of. And when we put in bad fats, does that get integrated into the cell membrane and then therefore create inflammation?
Absolutely. So, I mean, look, I think we all know trans fats are bad. I think your audience knows that. But vegetable oils, which are in everything, go in Whole Foods. Canola oil is in so many things, right? And these health food stores. And yet those fats, they turn rancid in the body. They're very fragile. They oxidize. And they go right for that cell membrane and drive inflammation, just like toxins. Matter of fact, bad fats like that, and I would put vegetable oils at the number one that most people are consuming, they can potentially drive that cellular inflammation. And then another one that I know people don't want to hear about, controlling glucose. Now look, like you, I go to all the health conventions, all these healthy people, and I watch what they eat. And I watch, our group of health preachers, if you will, raise their glucose again and again and again. And if you want to age faster than anyone, just keep raising glucose and insulin, spike after spike. And I'm telling you, even healthy eaters are still eating far too many grains in their diet. They're eating far too many things that spike glucose, and it's definitely driving cellular inflammation. So control glucose. That's a whole subject. That's a whole nother show.
Well, we definitely hit on it throughout this summit, but the cell membrane is not something that has been addressed. And so, it's an important piece. We've talked about fats. We've talked about healthy fats, bad fats, but the cell membrane is something that is often overlooked. And from what you're saying is more upstream. And that's really where one of the areas that we really need to be focusing on. And so what I hear you say is remove the bad, and I put that in quotes, the bad fats, like the vegetable oils, like maybe saturated fats from animals that were raised on grains or something like that.
Right. Remove the grain animals because those are bad fats. Mm-hmm. Grass-fed animal, now that's good saturated fat.
Right. Okay. And then add in the butter, and then that will help with the hormonal signaling. That'll decrease the cellular inflammation and then allow hormone information to be signaled and received more properly.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
It restores cellular energy. And this is, again, here's a whole show. I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Thomas Seyfried, Professor Thomas Seyfried, and he wrote a book called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. And his whole thing is, look, billions of dollars cancer research is going into genomics and, figuring out what genes line up with what cancers. And really, to date, it's doing nothing. So his point is we're looking in the wrong place. It is a metabolic disease, meaning that, look, the cells stop losing the ability to utilize fat for energy. My theory is, I think Dr. Warburg was a scientist who had this theory years ago at the turn of the century, and he said, look, he believed certain toxins were damaging the mitochondria, and that's where we make our energy, our cellular energy. And because of that, a cell would adapt, and it would adapt to use a more primitive form of glycolysis. That's another way of getting energy. So the most efficient way of using oxygen and glucose, it wasn't using. And it would lose the ability literally to use fat for energy. So by forcing the body to become more of an efficient fat burner, and we talk about strategies there, but we can get those bad cells that don't have that ability to die off and the immune system to attack them. But the bottom line is this. It all starts with bad cellular energy. If we can restore cellular energy and the efficiency of the cell to make energy, now the cell can detox naturally. Now the cell can make more glutathione. Now the cell can down-regulate inflammation. So really, arguably, it all starts, according to these great scientists, Warburg and Seyfried, it all starts with cellular energy. So good luck fixing a hormone condition. Good luck losing weight. Good luck detoxing if you don't reestablish or restore the cellular energy. So our number 3, restore cellular energy, really is a big topic, and there's many strategies of doing so. So this is a big one.
And Thomas Seyfried is absolutely amazing person to listen to, and his revelations around mitochondria and cancer as being a metabolic disease are truly amazing and completely, do that 180 of what, is being looked at right now. And that it follows your rule perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. And I think that, again, in my interview with him, he said, look, this goes beyond cancer, and I agree. This is chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia. I can go down the list of conditions that cellular energy is a massive problem. Again, remember, these 5 R's are really the epidemic. This is what is getting hit in everybody today and why people don't feel well. So when we restore the cellular energy, now we have the ability to start correcting a lot of things. One of the things I always teach my doctors is if things just don't seem like they're working, it really means you have to go back to cellular energy. So oftentimes it is the first thing we have to do is just get the cellular energy enough, risen up enough to where now they can start even using fat for energy at the cell. By the way, a lot of people, you can't lose weight today, folks. Listen, this is an important message. Here's a 180, right? The old adage of you get fat from eating fat. Those days are gone, right? It's not that fat makes you fat. It's the inability to burn the fat that you have. Did you hear that? So it's like, well, what are we doing when we're sleeping at night and we're not able to eat? Most Americans, unfortunately, Rudy, they don't have the ability to use their fat stores. In the day, they don't have the ability. So therefore, they go from glucose to glucose, craving glucose. And when they try a diet and say, okay, I'm just not going to do it, their body has to either eat its muscle, turn it into sugar, or it has to give them a craving they can't resist. So most people fail on diets because it's a cellular issue. It's a problem of the cell not being able to burn fat for energy. So, this is our number 3. If we can get the fats utilizing fat again for energy, now that's a normal, healthy cell. And now you're able to go 8 hours, 16, 24 hours without eating and go, I'm not hungry. I always say if you want to test how healthy someone is, see how long they can go without food. That's a true test of your health. So when you go, yeah, okay, great, go, don't eat today. How do you feel by the end of the day? If you go, I feel fine. Matter of fact, I wasn't even hungry. You're healthy. If you go, oh my God, I was tired, I had brain fog, you've got some work to do.
So besides the fats, adding good in good fats, how do we turn on the cell's ability to burn fat? And just to I was going to take a step back here. So we are addressing the membrane, which is the outside of a cell. And now we're diving into the inside of the cell to be able to restore that cellular energy. And we're focusing in on the mitochondria.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some strategies, right? I mean, this is, again, it's a whole show of its own. But,
right.
To force it, oftentimes we use some strategies that I call diet variation. I'm a firm believer that one diet is not for everybody, even though I wrote a book called The Cellular Healing Diet. But I do believe that there's diets that are really good at certain times for people. But when we look at every culture that's been extremely healthy in our history, we looked at the Hunzu people. There was a time where they thought they were vegetarians because they would go there in the summer and they were eating a lot of vegetables, very little meat, if any at all. But then they weren't going in the winter because it was a horrific winter, and it was hard for the British to get there. They were eating all fat. They were eating all dairy. They were eating, cheese and dairy and meat all through the winter. So they went from one diet to the next. And then in spring, they were out of food, and yet they couldn't grow food or harvest even naturally. So they called it, they had a name for it, fasting spring. Or starvation spring, I call it fasting spring, where they wouldn't actually eat for literally weeks and months at a time. They had very, very little food, if any. That variation, we know, really is the reason why they live so long healthy. Today, we don't get that because we don't switch our diet for any reason. If you look, everyone's stuck in the same diet. But the point is this. So when we vary the diet, we can put someone in ketosis, force them. We drop their carbohydrate levels so low that it forces the cells that are healthy to use fat for energy. The ones that don't make that grade, can't adapt, they die. We can put them into that state for 3 or 4 months and then move them into a little higher healthy carbohydrate diet, which would be my cellular healing diet. But that switching them, moving them, is how we fix that problem. One of the ways how we fix that problem. We use different fasts. We use intermittent fasting daily. We put people on what I call block fast, fasting them for 4 days, using stock. So this times of restriction, times of change, cause adaptation and can get the cells to adapt and be healthier. Bad cells don't adapt. Healthy cells do. So the bad ones die, and now we create new cells that are able to burn fat efficiently for energy. Pretty cool. Our ancestors did it naturally. We have to teach people.
We have to regenerate the energy producers in our cells by putting them through a stress. And that stress can be adaptation or changing of the diet. Diet variation is what you referred to it as. And that's putting people into ketosis, which is consuming higher amounts of, from a macronutrient standpoint, consuming higher amounts of fat, lesser carbs, and moderate protein, to in the summertime, springtime, when vegetables and carbohydrates are more plentiful, maybe eating a cleaner diet then, and then also implementing the starving or fasting, which is just, are you doing intermittent fasts for hours in a day? Or are you doing a day, 2 days?
Yeah, let me talk about myself. 3 years ago, I started something called intermittent fasting daily. And an intermittent fast means we're eating, typically we're just eating less. And the old adage that you can lose weight just by restricting calories, it's not so simple, right? Because I'm going to eat half this meal, push it away. And the next meal, I'm going to eat half this meal, push it away. Eventually you fail because, a lot of things happen. Your metabolism lowers, your body thinks it's starving, and you just eventually just want the meal and you give in. But we know that eating less, everybody lives longer. So 3 years ago, I started something called intermittent fasting daily. That means that I don't eat breakfast in the morning. I go 18, 20 hours from dinner till then my next meal. So I don't typically eat till 2 or 3 o'clock. And what happens is through that fast, the restriction, my body is utilizing its own fat for energy. You have to get there, right? I take people into that state very gradually. But then you become very efficient. Now, the key is here. You have to eat a very big dinner. You can't push calories away. So by eating a very big dinner till full, my body never thinks it's starving. So at the end of the day, I'm eating less calories. Therefore, according to every study, I'm living longer. I'm controlling my glucose because my body's feeding from itself. I'm getting rid of bad cells. So no wonder why every study on longevity shows that eating less actually works. But nobody in Okinawa or the Hunzu tribe or Tibet is going, I'm just cutting calories today. No, they eat less than Americans, much less, less calories. However, they're just not hungry. So I literally have days, Rudy, that I don't eat. I forget. And I have here's diet variation as well. Here's what I do. One day a week, I purposely go 24 hours without eating. Another day a week, I purposely eat higher carbs. So I purposely eat a much higher carbohydrate, maybe more sweet potatoes, some quinoa, I vary my diet even weekly. So that's diet variation. I believe it's amazing. But it allows your body to not think it's starving. It tells your body it has plenty. And after that one day a week where I eat more volume and even more carbohydrates, 2 days after, I'm visibly leaner. And I said this before the show. I said, hey, I'm 50 years old, and I'm at least 8% or below body fat. So just getting old doesn't mean you have to get fatter. I'm leaner today than I was in my 30s, for sure, possibly even my 20s. But intermittent fasting 3 years ago really was a big thing hormonally. And by the way, studies show a 2,000% increase, in growth hormone. That's a big, huge thing, especially in older folks, right? Like myself. So, but when you get that boost in growth hormone, you can get it through this diet variation. You can get it through some of these intermittent fasting. So these are some of the principles that I teach to doctors and the public.
I think it's a great piece to touch on that intermittent fasting, because what you're saying is it's not only helping the energy producers of our cells kind of clean out the bad ones or the ones that are dysfunctional and really push the ones that are functional and stress them a little bit to become more strong, but also this whole calorie deficit does not necessarily result in you chronically losing weight over 3 years until you whittle away to nothing, that your hormones start to balance because your cell's able to pick up on the message, because your cell's able to produce its energy, and now you're able to find, this even-keeled state of, low body fat percent, however your body's using fat for energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
And here's the thing. It's not even just weight loss, because a lot of bodybuilders today are doing this to optimize testosterone and growth hormone. Why? Because they're realizing that by, doing this intermittent fasting, strategy, what's happening is your cells are becoming more hormone sensitive. So they're able to actually gain more muscle and stay leaner. It's true. And I think it's even more dramatic the older you get. But, it really is a strategy that I think is really duplicating just what our ancestors did. When you look at the Romans, when you look at the Greeks, they never ate breakfast. In America, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And, even when you go to Europe, it's the continental bread. They don't even eat breakfast. I went there. I starved in the morning because I used to love breakfast, right? Because I came from America. But they have a totally different philosophy about breakfast, right? Most of them still don't eat it. And if they do, it's very tiny food. So we're one of the only countries in the world that strongly believe in the big breakfast. But here's the thing, though. Big breakfast works for most Americans. You know why? Because they have no hormonal ability to use fat for energy. So when they get up in the morning, they're just burning up muscle through the night because their cells are needing sugar, right? So, yeah, they have to eat. But that's not right. That's like the 6 meal a day philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, eat 6 meals a day. And when people do that, they kind of go, yeah, it works, because they stop eating their muscle, so they look a little better. They burn a little more fat because their metabolism raises up. But long term, it ages you prematurely. It doesn't work for weight loss at all. You want to eat less, live longer. You want to eat less and burn your own fat. And that's really the real way to stay lean longer and healthy, more importantly.
That's beautiful. I'm nodding my head here and have a huge smile on my face.
I know your listeners right now, they're pulling their hair out because I've just said so many things, even in the natural, healthy world that they come from, is opposite of what they heard. I mean, people say, I heard we have to eat 5-6 meals a day. Yeah, I know you heard that. I know you heard about saturated fat. I'm just telling you what actually really is the truth and works.
We're blowing up myths left and right with this interview.
It turned into the Mythbuster show. I didn't mean that for that.
You're gonna get I love it.
You're gonna get emails left and right now.
Bring them on. We'll throw some supporting research out to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We have the research. Right. We can be back there. Our number 4 is much less controversial. I think we all would agree that reducing inflammation is paramount, right? I mean, we can flip up any book and turn on any TV and they're talking about inflammation. But I always have to say, look, it's not just inflammation of the sore shoulder or knee. We're talking about, again, cellular inflammation. This is what blunts the hormone receptors. So, yeah, we have to reduce inflammation at the cellular level. Again, how do you do that without removing the source? How do you do that without upregulating or restoring the cellular energy? How do you do that without giving regenerating the cell membrane? So all of the 5 R's do play in. But, when we look at reducing inflammation, I think a lot of these ancient healing strategies really do the job the best. And when we talk about fasting, intermittent fasting, and even something I teach my clients is doing a fast every other month, whether it's a 4-day beef stock only, and even something called whey water, which is not whey protein, it's whey water, or just even a water fast. But periodic fasts, and Professor Seyfried made the point, is it decreases your chances of not just cancer, but really disease in general dramatically. Because by putting the body in that restricted mode, healing occurs. Every fast healing occurs. So when I deal with a very challenging case, I have them fast every other month even, and put this into their, just put it on your Google Calendar, I always tell them, time to start another fast. Every fast healing occurs. Why? Because fasting massively changes genes for the good, downregulates inflammation, R number 4. So the practice of fasting, animals do it instinctively if they're sick or get hurt. Humans, we have to be taught. Go without food, even though it's a biblical principle. Go without food.
Well, that's the piece that's so important, though, is the fact that it's been implemented for thousands of years, and there are many religions that support fasting as being something that is optimal for the body, that gets you closer to the higher power that brings your body back into regeneration. And the fact that studies weren't done then still doesn't mean that it wasn't helpful. It's now we're starting to see that the research is showing that it regenerates the immune system, prolongs life, avoid cancer, helps decrease your risk for cancer, et cetera. So
I mean, this is like, look, there's a lot of gimmicks in the natural health. These are not gimmicks. I mean, I call them ancient health, health strategies. We have the diet variation. It works. It does. Changing your diet, our ancestors did it. Utilizing things like, ketosis, states of ketosis. I mean, it absolutely works. And then intermittent fasting and these, longer fasts, this is what works. It really does. And you put that with true cellular detox, going upstream, removing toxins from the cell and healing the cell. That's how we're getting very, very, very sick people well. And that's why my passion is to teach it. And this is what I learned, with my own battle. And honestly, and I said this at the top of the show, that, there's a reason everybody goes through what they go through. And in that pain, you learn a lot of things, that you really have to learn to really make a difference in other people's lives. And, these principles, that's the real deal. It's not easy. We're not saying, hey, we have the miracle pill. This isn't easy, but it works, Dr. Rudy. It works.
I've seen it in my own journey and definitely with implementation in patients. But the clarification that you bring to this topic is second to none from what I've heard. And, it's obvious that you are passionate about this, that you have helped many, many people with this, not only yourself, and then you've interviewed a lot of experts to learn this information and get concrete evidence that backs it. And that's the difference between this and a gimmick, what we're saying and a gimmick.
No doubt. I had the pleasure of interviewing also. There was a doctor in South Florida there, and his Dominic D'Agostino, and great guy. He's training a lot of the special ops, the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers. He's putting them into ketotic state. Again, training them on diet variation, but putting them into ketotic state when they have to go into these high performance situations where they can go into seizures because the stress is so high. And in the past, they were giving these, high performance athletes, if you will, medications because they had to perform with 2 hours sleep, et cetera, to keep them out of seizures when they're diving in these deep waters. And now I'm in ketosis, and it's remarkable, and how the body performs. A lot of athletes today are realizing that it's not the high carbohydrate diet that they used to think about. One more Gatorade, this and that. That's such an old way of thinking. When you become an efficient fat burner, you can do athletic, performance, whether it's endurance, riding a bike for, hours and hours without what we call bonking. The people who are winning these 100-mile marathons, they're in ketosis, efficient fat burners. Imagine that. That was heresy 5 years, 10 years from now, or even 5 years, like I said. But the point is that our bodies perform amazing with fat. We just have to get people to become more efficiently at using fat. But that means we're going to have to do some of these strategies. And again, toxins are probably the number one reason why people can't burn fat, because it's driving cellular inflammation and all those things that we talked about. But these strategies, Dr. Rudy, are really how we get people to be efficient fat burners again, instead of just stuck in sugar burner. Remember, the cell can only use two things for energy: sugar or fat. When you're hormonally balanced, you have the ability to use either. Fat burns cleaner than does sugar. Fat burns like natural gas on the stove. You don't see any smoke. Sugar burns like the log in your fireplace. You need a damper. So when we want to bring someone into a state of health again that has hormone issues, by getting their cells to burn just fat, that means now we're not creating the inflammation by creating the smoke. So that's really, what we do is we bring people in these very efficient moments, times where they're only burning fat to get their cell to burn cleaner and therefore downregulate inflammation. So it works. And we're seeing it in athletes to perform better, and we're seeing it working in people who are very challenged and still don't feel well.
Yeah, and I think that's the important piece, is that, forgetting weight loss forever, the whole point of this summit was to, so people can reach their weight loss goals, but, we really want to see people reach their full potential. And this is not a 30-day diet or a 21-day cleanse. This is about giving you the quality information like Dr. Pompa is delivering here to be able to help you go beyond just the weight loss. Think beyond that. Think about your potential, how you can help other people just by getting into these states that not only will help you look good or help you perform better, but really bring you to a completely different level. And I think from psychological standpoint and spiritual and relationship building from that is just, it's impressive what you can gain from getting into these types of strategies.
A lot of people can't think clear and even be themselves and function who they are, because their brain is in a state of what I call brain fog, right? And that's a toxic driven issue. I was there, and again, when we get people to be a more efficient fat burner, you produce something called ketones. Well, guess what? Your brain loves ketones. Again, in the early 1900s, they used to utilize ketones and putting kids in ketosis to fix their brain. With certain medications that became not in vogue anymore, and we got away from using these states of ketosis to fix the brain. But today it's coming back. It's more important. We're seeing it in athletes. We're seeing it in neurological, neurodegenerative diseases. We're seeing the use of these ketotic states, as a healing modality that it's not only safer, it works better. Frankly, the drugs simply aren't working anyway. So it does. Well, we didn't get to our number 5. I guess we should finish there.
We might as well touch on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it really, I think we hit a lot of it. We don't have to spend a lot of time there, but it's reestablishing something called methylation. When we look at the cell and what's going wrong, toxins deplete something called methylation. And methylation is needed for detox. Methylation is needed to protect our DNA. We remember in the Duke University where they took the mice, gave them a toxin, and they turned on their obesity gene. Well, they took and they gave these mice a bunch of methylation groups, methyl donors, if you will. And when they did that, they turned off the gene. So what's depleting America, the planet, in methyl groups? Stress, physical, chemical, or emotional. People that have massive subluxation, that depletes your methylation. People that are emotionally stressed, that depletes your methylation. People who are chronically toxic at their cellular level, depletes your methylation. Now you have a problem, because now you are not adapting to stress anymore. I don't care what kind it is. And now you have a bigger problem, because your body will start pulling methylation to help you adapt to the stress. But now downstream, you leave hormones unregulated, because you need methyl groups to get rid of toxic hormones. And now you start building up toxic hormones that drive cancer and other diseases. So the methylation depletion that's epidemic has to be restored to turn off the bad genes, protect the genes you have, and also from a hormonal standpoint, we have to upregulate methylation to get your hormones to work right and get rid of toxic hormones. So anyways, it's a whole other thing. I learned a lot about it. Just my wife, her mother died of uterine cancer, but started 10 years before that with breast cancer, and she was methyl depleted. She ended up having massively high lead levels. My wife had massively high lead levels that depleted her methylation and started causing the same hormone problems that her mother had. So fortunately, we need to go upstream. I got rid of my wife's lead problems. I fixed her methylation problems. But we were supporting that pathway with certain products that really do support methylation. And, a lot of your B vitamins help do that. And again, it's another subject. A lot of your fats can help do that. But it's a very important subject, Dr. Rudy, and it is another show. But those are the 5 R's, and that's how you fix the cell to get well.
I love it. And I know a place in Michigan that needs a lot of this information with their lead-poisoned water.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I read that. You're right. And it's not just lead. Any stress. Remember, the body doesn't know the difference. Physical, chemical, or emotional will deplete it. So, I mean, it's a remarkable subject. The 5 R's really, I always say I wasn't even smart enough really to come up with it. I started looking at everything that was going wrong in the cell, and again, why I didn't feel well and why people don't feel well. And it really just fell into the place of this is what is happening, pandemically to people. Why they still don't feel well, despite all the amazing things they're doing. You've got to fix the cell to get well. The 5 R's just is a roadmap. And again, you have to detox the cell to truly get well.
Well, Dr. Pompa, it's been an absolute privilege and a pleasure to have you on here. You have hit on so many different topics and provided clarity in a couple of really key pieces, specifically around need to remove the source, how to regenerate the cell membrane, the positive benefits from getting into ketosis to not only restore the cell membrane, but also to boost up the mitochondrial function, and then talked about intermittent fasting, and then touched on reducing inflammation and reestablishing methylation and its importance to getting rid of those toxins in the first place. So it's this 5-step approach is not 5 steps in the sense of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is all catalysts or all synergistic to being able to turn on those hormones, to be able to have those cells hear those signals again, and to be able to get you to burn fat for energy and therefore, in this case, lose weight, but also comes with a whole other slew of benefits.
And Doctor, I've written many articles on these topics, and I know we opened up a lot of things here, but they can read the articles.
Well, definitely. Please tell me, where can people find more information about what you're doing and the information that you've provided here? How can they learn more?
Yeah, just go to my website. It's drdrpompa.com. Here, I'll write it up here, but it's DR without a dot, so it stands for doctor. Then my last name is Pompa, so it's Dr. Pompa and then .com. So there you go. People always say Pompa, they don't know how to spell it. It's really spelled the way it sounds. So yeah, perfect. And I have articles, videos about all of those topics, Rudy, and I hope that helps people.
Oh, absolutely. I think that this has been a very enlightening conversation and very educational, and it provides actionable steps that people can start to take, and it supports the information that we're delivering here in this summit. So thank you again for your time, Doc. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Did you find this information helpful? I am so thankful and appreciative of you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this life-changing and life-saving information. Now that you know more about how we need to address the cell to get well, looking at the membrane, looking at detoxification, looking at addressing the mitochondria, I encourage you to continue to take these lessons learned and begin now. Add more tools to your hero tool belt by bringing this information home with you. Click the link beside or below and purchase this project along with all of its amazing bonus gifts. We are all about over-delivering because we want to see you succeed. We want you to forget that term weight loss forever. Share this information with your friends, your loved ones, so that we all can reach our full human potential. This is your host, Dr. Rudy Mueller, saying live happy, Live healthy and affect others positively. Thank you for listening.